Welcome back to The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Faria. Joining me now, Pastor Sanford Simon from the St. George's Baptist Church, to talk about priests and pastors who go outside of the structure that's created within the organization that they do their ministering from. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kalisha, and it's a pleasure and a joy to be with you here and to share with your audience some thoughts in the next few minutes.
I mean, when you look at Dr. Father Gerard Paul, some are making the point of just calling him Gerard Paul these days since his suspension to indicate the disagreement with the position, the attitude he's taken towards his church. But Father Paul seems to be in the defiance and the rebellion that he's demonstrating, to be placing not just the Catholic Church, but all churches on the threat where people might tend to lose confidence in the church altogether. What do you think? In churches altogether.
Well, I mean, I am the president of the Grenada Baptist Association in the light of leadership, and also the pastor of the St. George's Baptist Church. The reality of it is that when you under authority, you have to submit to authority. Whether you like it or not, that's the clear directives of the Word of God. And in the society, if you have the breakdown of persons do not want to follow and be obedient to the leadership, then you have a problem. And it needs to be addressed. You cannot leave it by saying a person have a position. And we all can have a position. We all can have our own ideas, and each of us can say that I have a view on this, and that's okay for a person to have a view and a position. But if you're within the context of leadership and you have persons on authority above you, then you need to fall in line with the authority that is above you.
Even when the authority, not necessarily in the specific case of the Catholic Church, Bishop Harvey and Father Paul, but generally, even when that authority seems to be not in keeping with proper practices, or when you have questions.
Well, no, I mean, if the authority in keeping in proper practices, but I'm sure that each organization have a mechanism to deal with its issues and problem internally. So if you have a disagreement, you would voice it to your persons above you, superiors, and say, listen, I disagree with you, and these are the reasons. And they need to work it out to resolve the issue within that context. If that cannot be resolved, I'm sure there are mechanisms like the Catholic Church, which is an institution in itself, have the mechanism for which you can use to be able to clearly state what your opposition is within the context of the Catholic Church and not making it public. If it, like in the case of now Father Paul and being public, it means then that it has moved outside of the Catholic Church, and I guess that's why we are discussing it now. And the saying is, if your neighbor house is on fire, you better wet yours. And so I think it's important for us to have that dialogue and to clearly speak about that in the context of understanding what is happening and what needs to happen, because that can filter down to any church or any organization if it's not properly managed.
Because you said when your neighbor's house is on fire, wet yours. So I was about to I ask you whether or not you are concerned that maybe a few of the pastors under you might decide to go rogue on the Israel genocide or some other topic that they feel strongly about that you have not satisfactorily litigated in the public domain in your role as a pastor. Are you concerned that
No, I am not concerned. No, I am not concerned one bit, because I don't think at our church, and there are persons I'm sure who have disagreement within the Grenada Baptist Association, within my church, who may disagree, but we always have found a way to respect each other and respect the authority that you're under. And therefore, one would have to think, I'm sure there are persons within the Grenada Baptist Association that disagree with me on certain issues, but we learn to disagree to agree. And that is what is important, because when you take your disagreement from within your church and make it public. You have moved it out of that context of what is set up, the mechanism that is set up within your church to deal with the problem. And I guess that's what has happened with the Bishop Harvey and Father Paul, where that now has come outside of the Catholic Church. And what is the reason for that? I do not know. Why is the breakdown? But I think it's important for us to see and to understand that if you, especially if you're under authority, you need to be submissive to it. And if you have a problem where you really cannot deal with, or you do not want to be a part of that anymore, then the obvious thing for you to do, to go to your authority, go to your superior and say, look, I no longer want to be a part of this because I cannot reconcile. So these are decisions that I will take, and therefore then you have a dialogue.
So, and because you agree, there's some people who say, who are supporting Father Paul no matter what, and others who are saying that maybe the Catholic Church has been a bit more quiet than usual on the genocide in Gaza, but the tone and the venue for dealing with it, wrong place, wrong time, and also wrong tone, because Father Paul, when you listen to him, came across very rebellious, very defiant, and maybe even some may say very disrespectful of the leadership of his church in speaking about this matter. And I remember the Bishop of Castries making a point to me that within the setting, in terms of voicing your opinion, they are it's a collegiate sort of environment where you can speak, but that still it is not in the manner that Father Paul has done it. And you seem to be agreeing with that kind of sentiment.
Of course, the Catholic Church is an institution, and therefore there have mechanisms for which Father Paul, I'm sure, could have addressed his grievances than taking it public. I must say, I mean, let us bring that down to our home. You have a home, right? And you are a mother and father and children. And you would tell a child, listen, you should not do this. And the child decides, well, I don't care about you, mom, daddy, what you say. Or do I go in about and do my own thing? What will you do? Right? And the mothers and fathers who are listening to this, think about your children. And as a priest under authority, you are saying that, well, you really don't matter what they say or think. But if you think about it, those persons who maybe are saying, okay, they agree with him wholeheartedly, how would you deal with your children within the home when they come in and say they disagree with you and they blatantly say to you, I really going to disobey what you say or think, despite what you think? What will you do?
So the example, the takeaway from this very public meltdown between the bishop and his priest not only has implications for just general churches and the organizational structure in general, but also spills over into the example that's being offered to society.
Exactly, because that is what caused the greater breakdown in society, because a young person looking at that, the congregants will feel if the priest could speak to that way toward the bishop, they can do it too. And then the young man or woman feel that if the priest could do it, well, I could do it too. And then person in the evangelical church think they could do it too. The child who going to school think that they can do it to the teacher just the same way, because look at the priest, who should have knowledge of understanding what authority is and to be submissive and obedient and to deal with it in a proper way, going on a rogue way against his bishop. Therefore, other persons in the society would feel this okay for me to do. And then we have a bigger problem. And I think we have to look at the bigger issues here in context. I mean, you're within, for instance, within Baptists, there's certain beliefs and doctrine of Baptists. And if I do not no longer believe in that, therefore I need to pack up and leave, because I no longer believe what Baptists believe, or I no longer hold to the views. In the same way, in the Catholic Church, which is an in-depth institution, therefore it is a supermarket. You go there and what you get in that basket in the Catholic Church, that's what it is. It's difficult to change it. It is not one of what we call these small churches where they have one or two persons who have his own church. You could do what you want and say what you want. There is an hierarchy, and one need to follow that. And if you go out of line, there are procedures to deal with you. And I'm sure the bishop, following the procedures that is laid out for him to follow when such things that happen, he is dealing with it in the proper way as indicated. He said he wrote to him, he spoke with him, and therefore he was left with no choice because he continued, therefore, to make the decision that he made. And the people within his congregation also need to understand that they too need to be obedient to their authority, which is the head, which is the bishop. They need to be obedient to him, and he's the final authority within the state of Grenada. And therefore, they need to be careful speaking against their authority, and the Bible speaks to that because it can come back to haunt you.
And as you were speaking, my neck, I don't know the Bible as well as my 12-year-old son, but there's a lot in there about being obedient to authority and to the authority of God, not so?
Right. There is a whole lot of scripture, in Romans, even in Romans, they speak about you're talking about the government. It went so far to speak about the government, to being obedient to the government and the laws of their land. And so the Bible speak about that. So I'm saying that in the whole context and in a broader picture, not just specific just to the Catholic Church, but for we within the evangelical churches. What if that were to happen within our congregation? What would we do? If you're a bishop of one of the Pentecostal or Methodist or Anglican, what would you do? There are steps to be taken, but I think it's important that finally that the bishop had to take a decision to deal with the issue. Like I say, if you want to deal, cut off the head of the snake, and then to deal with it. So this is something that's been brewing, and Father Paul seems to want to continue to be disobedient, and the bishop decided that he had to take a decision, which he had the right to. And if I'm in his position, of course, you have to take a decision in the best interest of your church and in the context of your church and your doctrine stated. So I think it's important for us to look at the broader picture. How will we deal with this if our child or children disobey us in the home and you tell them to stop and they continue to do it? What will you do?
And now one of the points that Bishop Clyde Harvey has made is that the action that was taken was not taken because Father Paul spoke out in defense of the people of Gaza who are being murdered by the Israeli Defense Force, but that there is a pattern and a history going through almost all of Father Paul's life as a priest of defiance and rebellion and disobedience and breaking of certain vows within the church, that it's not just on this, because I don't think that even you, Pastor Simon, despite your strong belief in in obedience and respect for the organization and respect for authority, that you do not disagree with some of the sentiments expressed by Father Paul in specific to the suffering of the people of Gaza.
No, I mean, that is clear. I mean, the suffering the people of Gaza, I think we all agree. It's just too much. You talk about 32,000 plus people have died. Yes, the Israeli and Hamas that attacked them, you lose 1,500 persons who have died. Yes, that shouldn't be as evil as wrong. But two wrongs cannot make a right. And it's important for us to address that in the core of the situation, what's happening. There is nothing, and I'm sure, as Bishop Harvey rightly said, there is nothing wrong with him addressing the issue and disagreeing and agreeing with, but to say that this is the situation in Gaza and he's hurt by it and he has the right to do that. I think everyone has the right to state their opinion on that. But I think it's a bigger picture if your leadership come and sit and talk with you and say, look, we heard you, we heard what you said, we agree or disagree with you, but this is how we'd like you to approach this going forward. And I think it's in his capacity as a priest, he needs to be listened to his leadership and to be able to be submissive to that. Although he may disagree, say, look, I disagree with you, but I would hold my tongue publicly on this because I am under authority. And that's how it should be, despite that you may disagree. I have persons within my church that disagree with me on issues, and that is okay, but then you need to be managed.
What are the implications generally of church, not just the Catholic Church or the Baptist denomination, but just the church where there is this breakdown in authority? This, because you keep saying submit to authority, submit to authority. Submit is a word that sometimes goes me the wrong way. What are the implications of not submitting? People may,
Well,
submissiveness is not necessarily.
well, I use the word because it is you, right? You under authority, and therefore one tells you that this is the position of the church or the position of the organization, and therefore, despite you may disagree, you would have to then follow that position that is taken. If you decide the outside of the position that the authority or your organization has taken, you want to go out on your own and to say, well, they have agreed on this position, but this is my position. It means then that you want to do your own thing, and you're not willing to submit under the authority that you have and to fall in line with it. I mean, it may be that you reach so far that your organization is so far off that you think you have to stand and deliberate on this issue. Then you could talk to your leadership and say, look, I am going to publicly state my position, and this is what I'm going to do. They would have then to decide what do they do. But I would believe it's better if you have a dialogue and discussion and find an applicable way to navigate the situation that you are confronted with.
And because what is also interesting is that Father Paul himself said that there was a retreat last year, a Catholic priest retreat at Mount St. Irvins, where nothing was said. He claims nothing was said about this, at least he did not hear anything being said about the genocide. And that he said to me that he wanted to speak up, but then he chose not to speak up within that forum where they were gathered, but then took it public.
But you see, that's my dilemma. You are within your the framework of your colleagues, and you are so feeling so passionate about that issue. Therefore, that's the best place to be able to say, brethren, I know this is not on the agenda, but under any other business or whatever forum that you'd like to raise to there, you said, look, I am very concerned about what's happening in Gaza and with Israel. And so I would like us to have a deliberate on the issue or to be able to talk about it. If they have raised it, I think that was the best place to raise it and to have that discussion and dialogue. I think taking it out of that did he go to sit down with Bishop Harvey and to say, Bishop Harvey, I would like to have a meeting with you because I'm concerned and some things are an issue with me. I would like to have the discussion with you as our bishop. I do not know if he has done that. But those are the route I think would be taken first before you go public with such an issue, with your disagreement with your leadership.
How does that sort of disobedience and rebellion hurt a church?
It hurts. It hurts because you begin because then you develop sides there who would disagree with him and those who would agree with him, and those who would agree with the bishop, those who disagree with the bishop or with the pastor, and therefore the pastor, the bishop now has to navigate through that. It brings division. There is nothing else coming out of this. As you see, I'm sure there are persons in the River Sally Catholic Church that agree with the bishop, and there are those who disagree with him, who agree with Father Paul, and therefore the church itself now becomes divided, and the unity of the body is no longer the ultimate. It is now trying to heal this division. You spend a lot of time trying to heal the division, and where you could have been doing other things, but then it hurt the cohesiveness of the Catholic Church itself and the body of the Catholic Church, but also the local congregation in River Sally now will have some issues because Father Paul is now suspended. Another priest would come. There people would say, I ain't going to church because this is Father Paul. And the division gets deeper if somebody be the bigger person to say, look, this is where we are, and I take my responsibility for where I am. But the bishop has spoken, and therefore we must all fall in line with what the bishop has spoken. Said, sorry.
And so now for healing, for the unity of the church, for keeping to the scriptures of obedience and submitting to authority, what do you think Father Paul should do? If he,
the first thing should happen, he should ask for a meeting with his bishop. It is important to sit down and have that discussion with his bishop and to help to resolve the issue and have that discussion and say to him, see where the bishop is, see where he is. They need to find a common ground and then to be able to ask for forgiveness between their both, and then to be able to do a joint a statement, whether it is Father Paul himself should be able to come and say, look, I've spoken with the bishop. We have found a way to deal with it. I ask for his forgiveness and I await his decision in somewhere or the other. But it should be a move for healing, and healing and for forgiveness is necessary because it also would reflect on the local Catholic Church in Riverside and the wider Catholic Church in Grenada is impacted by this, and therefore it should quickly move to a resolution where Father Paul and Bishop Harvey find an applicable way to resolve that. But a lot is weighing on Father Paul himself, which need to take the initiative to be able to go and have this discussion, because it seems that there were discussion before between Bishop Harvey and him. He was warned, as I heard he said, or spoken to, and he continued. So therefore, he needs to take the steps now to resolve the issues.
And certainly humility, another Bible principle, may have to come into play.
Right, and on both sides, like I said, it takes two to tangle, and it takes two to untangle. And therefore, it's important that the both of them to be able, but one need to take the initiative. And at this point, it is, I always say, if you're under authority, it's necessary for you to take the steps to be able to say, look, I want to have a meeting, I want to have a discussion to be able to resolve those issues. The issues that we are confronted with. But remember, the Bible speaks clearly about forgiving for brotherly love, and 1 Corinthians chapter 13 talk about loving and caring each other. It's important. And then you look at the gospel, look at love each other. It's important for us to love each other, and that needs to be the ultimate out of all of this. With Bishop Harvey and Father Paul, there need to be a resolution of saying, listen, we need to love each other and care for each other and forgive each other. The members in Riverside need not to go down the road of who for and who against. Your bishop has spoken, and therefore they need to follow the direction and leadership of the bishop, despite they may disagree with him. But they need to be able to do so, because all you're bringing is more division, and Pastor Paul himself need to be able to take the initiative and help to lead those who are going against the bishop. And the bishop himself, as said, need to also be able to be open again to listen and to hear and to resolve. And I'm sure Bishop Harvey, knowing him as I know him, he would be willing and ready to sit down and have a discussion to resolve the issues.
Pastor Stanford Simon, thank you so much for joining me on The Narrative to share your thoughts on this developing story. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure and a joy, and I do hope that is resolved quickly.
This is The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Farrier, speaking there to Pastor Sanford Simon of the St. George's Baptist Church in Grenada. He's also head of the Organization of Baptist Churches in the country, speaking about the development in the Catholic Church, where Father Gerard Paul has been suspended after years of rebellion in the church, and finally, recently accusing the Pope and the entire church of not speaking out on the genocide in Gaza. The whole manner in which this view was presented, attracting the ire of the bishop, and ending up with Father Paul losing his parish in River Sally in St. Patrick in Grenada. More when we come back.